So the Middle East will be transformed, and the future of that region is never, I don't think it's ever looked brighter. You couldn't have, we did the Abraham Accords. I hope you're going to be getting into the Abraham Accords finally. Yeah, so will you please go back and explain? It's time now. Mohammed said, oh, yes, as soon as we do this, as soon as we do that. I said, Mohammed, we did that. Oh, yes, but we have a couple of other things. It's now time. We've now taken them out, and they are out bigly. We got to get into the Abraham Accords. And we hope all of the countries are going to be in the Abraham Accords. Now, we have some very brave countries that did it, years ago. They went in, and you know who they are, the early four. And they did a great thing in doing it, and it was great for them also economically, but it was a great thing that they did it. But I think all the Middle Eastern countries are going to be joining now. And in some cases, I would say all the Middle Eastern countries and beyond. You have people not in the Middle East that want to be members. You'll be seeing that soon. In the meantime, the conflict in Iran also makes it absolutely vital for the radical left Democrats in Congress to immediately end their dangerous shutdown of our Department of Homeland Security. They want to play games. That's all they are. These people are lunatics. They sort of remind me actually a little bit of Iran. They're deranged. They're deranged Democrats. For 42 days, they've tried to completely eliminate funding for the number one duty of government, which is keeping America safe. And they want no ICE. They want no Border Patrol. They want no protection of any kind to be given, reopening our borders and stopping all immigration enforcement in our country. They want to have our borders be open again. We took in 25 million people. We've gotten a lot of them out. Tremendous numbers of people that should never have been here. Over 4 long years before my election, these same radical, lunatic Democrats let 25 million people pour across our borders like they were nothing, like they were non-existent. These people were totally unvetted, unchecked, including murderers, drug dealers, gang members, vicious criminals, even the criminally insane. In 2024, the American people voted in a landslide to stop the invasion of our country. And I won all 7 swing states by millions and millions of votes. We won the Electoral College by a massive number. We won the popular vote, millions and vote, just millions. This was a big election. I loved every minute of it. And for the first time, no Republicans done anything like this in decades, but for the first time, we won the counties of America. That's a big one. 2,700 to 525. 2,700 to 525. 87% of the vote. We won 87% of the counties. In other words, it was a mandate like our country has not seen in many decades. It was a mandate for an ideology, which is an ideology. I think that he's losing the MAGA base. I said, really? Because of the war. See, I get into a war. Of course, they call it a war. I call it a military conflict. But there's a legal reason for that. But you get into a war or a military operation or conflict for you, and then they say, my base. I said, no. Like, for you, and then they say, my base. I said, no. MAGA's stronger than ever because MAGA's make America great again. But my MAGA people, which is the greatest phrase in the history of politics. It's the most important movement by far, probably in the history of the world. I mean, there's never been anything like this. And in fact, just a few days ago, you have to understand, the fake news right back, oh, that's a lot of fake news. Yeah, so you brought a lot of fake news with you. They must know you're going to make a speech at some point because look at but what happened is the fake news was saying, he may. They hope. It's like, oh, we got to get rid of this guy. They say, he may be losing his MAGA base. And that would be maybe the end of him. And then I happened to be watching CNN, which is terrible. They treat me terribly. In fact, just a few days ago, CNN had a poll that had me at 100% of MAGA voters. They said they've never seen anything like that. Can you put that up? I actually said if you could put it up. Do you have the technology to put it up? Go ahead, give it a shot.
You know, sometimes you look at the polling data and there are numbers that just jump off the screen at you, and this is one of those. Because just take a look here. MAGA GOP view of Trump. Approve 100%, 100%. If you are a member of MAGA and the GOP, you approve of Donald John Trump. 0% say that they disapprove. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know you can't go higher than 100%. He is the 1900.
Good evening. You are watching the wrap.
Really showing his polls. Sorry, we're
both in disbelief.
Yes.
Really showing his polls.
You can hear them before you see them, but this is Susie Boniface and Benedict Spence who are going to be taking us through the papers this evening and commenting on Donald Trump's latest address. I think the headline there is that he's claimed within the last few minutes that he's won concessions from Iran. This is where he's speaking in Miami. He said Iran sent him 10 ships of oil to make up for suggesting earlier in the week that peace talks were not actually underway. Let's have a look.
Remember this? They lied about 3 days ago. I said, yeah, we're negotiating with Israel. We are not negotiating. They're being hit so hard, anybody would be negotiating. They are negotiating. They're begging to make a deal. They're begging to make a deal. Turned out I was right. They were negotiating, which they admitted 2 days later. And in order to make up for their misstatement, they said, we're going to send you 8 ships of oil. And the following day I saw, this is 2 days ago, I saw on one of the networks, very strange, there are 8 ships of oil coming out of Iran. And then they actually said, we're going to add an extra 2. And they added an extra 2, so we had 10 ships. And then people realized we were actually negotiating. And we're negotiating now, and it'd be great if we could do something, but they have to open it up.
Well, meanwhile, Iran has condemned the latest strikes on its territory. It's reported that Israel has targeted 2 nuclear sites inside Iran. Last night, President Trump said he would hold off on striking Iran's energy plants for a further 10 days per Iranian government request to allow space for negotiations. Well, tonight, Iran's foreign minister said that the latest attacks are in breach of that offer. Well, Abbas Araghchi posted this on social media. Israel has hit 2 of Iran's largest steel factories, a power plant and civilian nuclear sites, amongst other infrastructure. Israel claims it acted in coordination with the US. The attack contradicts POTUS' extended deadline for diplomacy. Iran will exact heavy price for Israeli crimes. Let's discuss all of that with Susie and Benedict. Welcome to you. Not the usual open to our programme because we were watching Donald Trump and you were commenting supposedly off mic, but we were on. Doesn't matter. We started the show a little earlier.
It's real
than planned. Exactly. It's real. So tell me your real views on what you heard from Donald Trump.
Oh, you can't disagree with that. 100% of MAGA supporters are in favour of Donald J. Trump. And if you know your numbers, you know you can't go higher than 100%. I'm taking the figures as I get them, and those are pretty stonking numbers. More as we get it, basically.
What about his claim that Iran have sent him 10 ships of oil by way of an apology for denying that they're actually in negotiations?
Yeah, this was a thing which early in the week I think he described as a lovely present from Iran. He wouldn't tell anybody what it was, but it cost a lot of money. Then it now turns out to be it's 10 ships of oil. I suspect tomorrow we might find out it's 10 ships of oil that went to someone else, but they just allowed them through the Strait of Hormuz as a goodwill gesture or something like that. But you know, he's saying what he's saying. But the fact is that although he may want to break off a press conference there just to go to his poll numbers in a mad fantasy land that they used to be at some point in one poll, Donald Trump's in an election year. He's got the midterms coming up. He's started a war he didn't need to have. He did so without stocking up on the US strategic oil reserves first. You've got massive queues at airports across the US, which, of course, are used like train stations over there. They're how people get about, because there's a shutdown in the Department of Homeland Security, and petrol has gone through the roof in a country that just drives everywhere. He's got really, really big problems, and if you found one poll that says 100% of everybody loves me, then good luck with that, Donald, because November is going to tell him a very, very, very different story.
Well, I mean, he was saying yesterday that he's very far from being desperate, and the Iranians are the ones that are desperate. He doesn't care, everything's fine, they're winning the war. Nothing to see here.
I think everybody is pretty desperate in this situation. If he's not desperate, then he's possibly the only person who isn't. I mean, as you say, Susie, he said that this was a very expensive present, and boy, are we all about to find out just how expensive this present is. The economic shockwave that hasn't even really hit us yet, to be honest, but that is coming down the track and will come, even if he does end the war in a matter of weeks, like he keeps on telling us is within his gift to do. Even if that does happen, it's going to hit Europe like a tidal wave. It's going to hit a lot of Arab countries as well very hard, and it is hitting and going to continue to hit the US. Funnily enough, listening to him talking about, you know, his voter base, whether or not MAGA Republicans support him or not, I suppose up to a point he might not really care, because he does seem to be on a bit of a bender where he's basically going, OK, I'm for peace one day, I'm going to start a lot of conflicts the next day, because he's all about legacy now. What I suspect is going to be the case is there are an awful lot of other Republicans sitting here, watching all of this unfold, feeling very uncomfortable about this. And one thing that I would say is I think it's really noticeable that amidst all of this, the blue-eyed boy, the next guy, the successor, J.D. Vance, is almost nowhere to be seen in any of this. You can tell he is keeping his profile as low as possible, because he will be watching what this is going to do for his prospects of being president and thinking, what on earth have I signed
And
up?
also because of his previous comments about going to war with Iran. That was something that he said absolutely should not be done. That's why he's been quiet in recent days. But Marco Rubio today saying that they expect the war to be over in a matter of weeks. It's not going to be prolonged. It's coming to the end. We know that Donald Trump is looking for an off-ramp. But Iran has been struck by Israel in the intervening time and nuclear sites.
We're just about to finish this war.
We're ramping down, or we're ramping up.
Said
and troops are being sent to
while the war was
to Iran.
intensifying around him, while things were getting worse. What's been
You could stop with that, to be honest. That's about where we all are.
That's the political commentary for the day.
Clip that. Clip that.
It's just that they keep saying something and then they say that it hasn't happened. We are in negotiations, we're not in negotiations. We are at war, we're not in a war. It's a military action. We are sending some troops and not sending any troops. There's 10,000 troops on the way to have a war they're about to end. Do me a favour, they're not about to end it. It doesn't really matter. Even if Rubio is talking about how they're going to pull out in a couple of weeks and they'll be there, if any part of the Iranian regime is still there, then Iran's won, right? And they're in this situation where they don't have to do very much in order to defeat Donald Trump. They just have to continue. They have to be able to hold on for a bit, just one of them. One Ayatollah, that's it, they win. If Donald Trump has to wipe out everybody and everything in order to win, he started on the back foot. He did it without building up a strategic oil reserves. He created his own economic crash and the global shockwave we're all feeling.
But he does want to end it now. I mean, we believe that, don't we? But why send 10,000 troops?
Only because he's realised it's a dreadful mistake.
But why send 10,000 troops?
If I'm honest, it's because as much as I think he would like to end it, I think, again, the big thing that we're all talking about here is, you know, these strikes that were committed today were not committed just by the United States, they were committed by Israel. And ultimately, the ongoing story about all of this is that the United States just doesn't have the handle on Israel that it would perhaps like to have. If Israel decides it's going to do something unilaterally, then the United States shrugs and goes, oh, well, here we go again, because we can't just let this sort of happen without us being there. We have to have some part in this. So if Netanyahu decides, if he turns around to Trump and goes, OK, we've hit enough targets, we've hit enough, oh, no, we're going to do it again. We've found new ones, we're going to keep on going. That's Trump's issue. He can't abandon Israel. He can't abandon Netanyahu because then he looks weak. He is abandoning an ally, and that would send a huge signal to everybody else from, you know, Europe to Japan, OK, you can't trust the United States. But every time that this happens, he is weakened, he is made to look weaker, and he's unable to extract himself from this conflict. It's a really difficult situation for him.
Do you think that he has emboldened Netanyahu and now, as you say, he can't seemingly control him?
I think Netanyahu was emboldened to start with, and I think he partly emboldened by the criminal actions that were coming against him, which meant that He had a weakened government to start with. When October 7th happened, he had to have a wartime government with a coalition which is barely held together. He's got a lot of crazy wingnuts from the extremes who've had to be brought into that government. It's the only thing that's propping it up. He's facing jail himself, and he needs to have a forever war, frankly, because that's how he maintains his position, which is exactly the same position that Iran's been in. They've always had to have a war with Israel in order to justify their own existence. And Trump has just enabled everybody because he's a stupid, stupid man. And he's the worst kind of stupid because he's dangerous and stupid. And that's just the worst kind of dangerous you can get. It's the worst kind of stupid you can get. Stupid and just fairly benign we can all live with. That's just someone on the bus you don't want to sit next to. This person, he's got nukes. That's terrible.
I hope he's not watching.
He's not watching. He's talking about his polling, right? That's what he's doing. He's too busy just crossing the 100% success rate.
And we're going to hear from someone who is...
Which, again, if you know your numbers, not much higher, you notice. Not high, not much higher.
If you know your numbers...
a better award than the one that you're not fighting and have definitely not won, because, even though you didn't start it.
Well, should we hear from someone who was in the room, our US correspondent Martha Kellner, who was listening to Donald Trump. And Martha, what did you take away from what he had to say? Was there 10 ships of oil as a gift from the Iranians?
Yeah, Donald Trump still speaking at the moment, but I think we're safe to say he's moved away from the subject of Iran, although he might, of course, return doing that famous weave that he talks about. But it was a meandering yet bullish speech as ever. He spoke about the American military being the greatest in the world, having weapons that no one's ever seen before. He said that they are decimating Iran, that this military operation is 2 weeks ahead of schedule. He said Iran is not the bully in that region any longer. He described them as being on the run. But I'm not sure we really learned a great deal more about the off-ramp that Donald Trump is clearly looking for in this conflict. He did, though, take the opportunity at this conference. This conference is called the FII. It's hosted by a Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund. He took the opportunity in front of this audience to thank his allies in the Middle East. He named the United Arab Emirates. He named the Saudis, calling them powerful. He then waxed lyrical about Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince. He said, "You have more titles than everyone else on earth, and you deserve that because you're a winner." And he said that the future of that region has never looked brighter. This conference, though, taking place against the backdrop of MBS, apparently telling Donald Trump that he wants him to continue in this war until it is absolutely finished. The Saudi crown prince perhaps sniffing an opportunity to reshape the region and put the Saudis at the very forefront of it in the future. He also, rather bizarrely, played a clip. Donald Trump played a clip from CNN, which showed a poll indicating that the MAGA base of the Republican Party supports him 100% on this conflict. I do think, though, that there are certain areas that they wouldn't support him. I've been speaking to hardcore members of the MAGA base, and they say that if there are boots on the ground, US boots on the ground in Iran, they would no longer support this war. Certainly, though, Donald Trump's Foreign Secretary Marco Rubio says there are no plans for US troops on the ground in Iran. There was, as ever, a couple of moments of comic relief, if you like, in that speech from the president. He accidentally called the Strait of Hormuz the Strait of Trump to laughs from the audience. He then said, "There's no mistakes from me, although the fake news would have it otherwise." But Donald Trump continuing to speak, and we'll definitely let you know if there are further updates on the Iran conflict.
Thank you very much. We shall leave you on a Trump watch there, Martha. Thank you. Interesting comments within that the Strait of Trump, least of which I think, was it for comedic
Maybe it's the same vein as turning the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. Maybe it's something that maybe we'll come back to at some point. But you noticed there, what was said was that 100% of MAGA supporters do back Donald Trump. But a lot of people say, but if boots go on the ground, maybe it won't be 100%. Maybe it'll only be, who knows, 98%. That's dangerous times if you're Donald Trump. But you know, maybe we should be taking his own polling with just a little pinch of salt. Maybe I was wrong to jump on that bandwagon.
Interesting what Martha was saying about MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, that he's saying to Trump, you know, finish this war, do it properly.
Yeah. The other countries in that region have had a problem with Iran for a long time. It's been a source of instability and terror, and of course sectarian division, which hasn't helped. And so they would like it resolved. And I think long term, a lot of the countries in that area are going to want to retain their links to the US, the historic ties that they've had. But they can't obviously do that with a country that is unstable. And the US is becoming increasingly as unstable as the demented person currently running it. And, you know, for example, one of the examples would be that they've used, I think it's about 850 Tomahawk missiles in the first month alone of this conflict. They only make a few hundred a year. They're running out of Tomahawks. And you can't go and start a war unless you know that you have some munitions, there's some more coming in, and how many you're going to use. And frankly, it also means that if they have to start manufacturing more of these things in a hurry, Ukraine isn't going to get the help that it needs. Putin is being emboldened and has had a big injection of cash thanks to the oil prices and everything else. So all Trump's done at this moment in time is make everything worse. Iran and the regime is further embedded. That area is more unstable. Putin's richer and the war in Ukraine is on the back foot. He needs to win it in order to have any kind of a victory. And that's what the Saudi Arabia is saying, is that please make this worth something, anything at all.
The issue that countries like Saudi Arabia face is that if the United States doesn't succeed, Iran still has huge resources in terms of ground troops. That's the sort of thing that the Arab nations can't actually withstand, no matter what weapon system the US gives them. What you will see, and this is the most serious aspect of all of this, if Iran comes out of this situation strengthened or perhaps with nuclear weapons, all of those other countries are going to start ratcheting up their own nuclear weapons programs because they will say there's no other guarantee of our safety.
Okay. Let's move on to how Lebanon's affected in all of this. And Israel says it's begun a wave of strikes targeting the militant group Hezbollah in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Thousands of Israeli troops have moved across the border into Lebanon since the start of the war. Our data and forensics team has geolocated IDF soldier activity close to the Litani River. Meanwhile, Hezbollah claims Israeli soldiers have been conducting operations at a number of locations across the south. Israel says it plans to control a zone in southern Lebanon with the Litani as a northern security line. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports from Tyre in southern Lebanon.
This is all that's left of Mervat's kitchen. It's a scene of utter devastation.
Oh. Wow, my goodness. The whole thing's fallen down. Oh, oof, look at this.
Israeli bombs are tearing through Lebanese homes on a daily basis. And Mervat and her neighbours know Israeli troops are just behind. But those in the city trying to clear the rubble and debris out of their broken homes either can't or won't go.
Oh my goodness.
Mervat usually shares the bedroom with her sister. They fled after getting an Israeli warning of the attack, but have now returned with nowhere else to go.
Oh my goodness, that is quite a scene.
Like so many here, she believes Hezbollah are the only ones standing between them and the Israeli troops. Without them, she says, we'd all have been killed already, and Israel would have already taken Lebanon. It's a view that's strongly embedded here, where Hezbollah has deep roots. Many remember the last Israeli invasion, which saw Israeli troops occupy Lebanese land for nearly 2 decades, and which birthed Hezbollah as an armed resistance group. But the refusal to leave the area demanded by Israel comes at a terrible cost. Another Israeli strike, this time in Saksakia, north of Tyre, flattens another home. 6 people were killed, 3 of them children. Among them a 3-month-old baby carried out of the rubble by his distraught father. Israeli troops are inside South Lebanon and keen to show it. The army chief was filmed visiting his troops in an undeclared location in the south. He seemed to be preparing them for an indefinite stay, telling the soldiers they'd remain for as long as necessary to ensure Israeli border towns are safe. In other images supplied by the Israeli army, soldiers are seen moving through a building, taking up firing positions and poring over Hezbollah ammunitions they say they've recovered. They're also filmed going through tunnels, which they claim are freshly built, although we've been unable to independently verify this. The propaganda war is as intense as the battlefield fighting. Hezbollah pushed out a video claiming to show their drones destroying Israeli armoured vehicles, positioned in a devastated Lebanese border village. Another video shows Hezbollah fighters in action. They're seen preparing and then firing volleys of rockets into northern Israel and targeting the troops massing on the border. The hospitals in southern Lebanon are under immense strain, but Israeli military warnings to leave are being resisted by tens of thousands of residents and the medical staff.
For me, I am staying here until my last breath. This is my land, this is my work, this is my job, to help people and to keep them safe, and I will stay till my last breath. We are not moving.
This is what's happening all over the south of Lebanon. Homes smashed in an instant. They were given just 2 hours to leave the area, and you can see lots of even little boys going up the stairs there to try and retrieve some of their belongings. Everything gone in an instant. But Mervat and her sister Nadia have no choice but to remain in their bombed-out home. No, I'm not leaving, Nadia says. Where can I go? I have nowhere and I don't have money. And most of her family, she says, are already displaced. Mervat is at a loss about where to start with this mess, but she insists she will rebuild. This is her family home and she's not ready to give it up. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Tyre.
Just want to bring you some breaking news that we're hearing coming in via our partners at NBC, and that is that several American service members were injured by an Iranian missile fired at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia today, and that's according to two US officials. None of the injuries are considered life-threatening. At least one aircraft was also damaged in the attack. And just to update on the position in terms of injured and killed servicemen, we hear that at least 303 Americans have now been injured in the war against Iran. 10 of those were seriously injured. So just to reiterate that breaking news, several American service members were injured by an Iranian missile fired at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia today. I mean, we were just talking before about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, saying that, you know, he wants the United States to properly finish this war.
Yeah, and it's actually touches upon something Susie was saying about the lack of munitions going into this conflict in the United States, lack of capacity to be able to supply all of its allies. It's focusing a lot on this theatre at the moment. That means, obviously, less stuff for Ukraine. It also means less stuff out in the Far East for Japan and Korea and Taiwan. But all of those nations that have sort of set themselves up and set their security apparatus up on the basis that the United States will provide guarantees for them are going to be looking very nervously now at this and saying, actually, what guarantees can you provide us? Because when push comes to shove, you start heavily rationing your munitions and you deliver them to where actually matters the most to you, specifically for you to use, not for your allies to use. A lot of the Gulf states are, quite touchy about the fact that a lot of the stuff that was supposed to be deployed to them has been diverted to the Israelis in the first place. It makes sense why it would be deployed to the Israelis, but still, when oil infrastructure then starts getting hit, the Gulf states are sat there going, well, what was the point of any of this? We were kind of acting on the assumption that you'd help us out. Obviously, it makes a great deal of sense, though, for the Iranians to be neutered for all of those states, because the main thing that this war has demonstrated, ultimately, is the immense power Iran actually holds over the world's energy infrastructure. If it decides it's going to attack any of those countries. It can deal them massive blows that they can't necessarily respond to without the United States. So this is, I think, the Saudis, on behalf of the rest of the Gulf Cooperation Council, saying, you guys have not only got to finish the job, once you're done with this, there can't be any, OK, we're done with the Middle East and we're pulling back. You know, you've punched the hornet's nest, you poked the hornet's nest. You can't leave us to our own devices. Or it will mean we have to ratchet up. Maybe that means we find other allies. Maybe that means we find China or Russia. Or maybe it means we develop our own weapons, which you guys probably don't want us to have, if we're being honest here.
We heard the President this evening, you know, saying that the war is, you know, being won by himself, and also that his figures, 100% of MAGA base, were in support of the war. But when we have headlines like this, American service personnel being injured, being killed, that is going to change pretty soon.
It's going to start taking a big knock. There are plenty of other polls available which show that he is losing a lot of support. And it's not just the MAGA base that elected Donald Trump. There was a broad coalition of voters, including other Republicans and Latinos and people of colour in the US. And in the last month alone, support among Latinos has dropped 20 points, disapproval. It's 72%, I think it is, of Latino voters disapprove of this mistake, and he was reliant upon their vote.
That's courtesy of ICE, isn't
yeah,
it?
And it's because of ICE, it's because of the shutdowns, it's because of all these things that have been going on. But the fact is that this was a completely half-cocked war from day one. If you want to go and have a war, whether it's the right war or the wrong war, and you want to argue about it, it's one thing. But you need to have your allies on side with you. You need to have your munitions ready and packed up, and you've got to have a little stock of them. You need to have your strategic oil reserves built, and you need to know what your outcome is going to be and what your intentions and your aims are. We keep hearing from people like Marco Rubio and Caroline Leavitt, oh, we nearly achieved all of our aims. You still haven't told anybody what they are. They've changed every 5 minutes since you did announce what one of them might have been.
Started out with regime change, didn't it?
And he started saying, well, I've got a 15-point peace plan, and points 1, 2 and 3 were no nukes. And frankly, as Ben is entirely right, what he's saying is he's destabilised this area, this incredibly wealthy and incredibly volatile part of the world, so much that other nations in there who have not previously sought nuclear weapons because they would be friends under American hegemony, and they said, we know that America and its nukes will protect us. Now, if they can't rely on America, they need their own nukes. Suddenly, every country in there is going to be not just creating or wanting a nuclear deterrent, but testing nuclear deterrents. You have to test those missiles and test those warheads. You have to have test detonations. And as the nuclear veterans in this country can tell people, that's not a good idea. It's a terrible idea. And if you have lots of it going on, Russia and China start testing their weapons. Now, they already know how to use nukes, but what they don't know is quite how they work on a hypersonic missile. They start testing those. America's tech is nowhere near in the same place as the Russia and the Chinese are on that point. So America has to test, even to try to catch up. Suddenly, it's the Cold War all over again, and we're testing nuclear weapons every 5 minutes. Only now it's in the Middle East, and they've all got one. Well done, Donald!
That's where Greenland comes from, because that's the only part on the globe where if the Russians fire a hypersonic missile, it's the only place that the United States might be able to intercept one, is if it has missile silos in Greenland, at which point they start talking about that again.
We haven't heard much on Greenland recently, have we?
Oh, it'll come back. It'll come back. It'll come back.
Don't bring it back into play. Let's move to another developing story tonight, and coincidentally, a very good friend of Donald Trump. Police say that the golfer Tiger Woods has been arrested and charged with driving under the influence after a car crash in Florida. The police say Woods had tried to overtake a truck at high speed while driving his Land Rover before swerving and rolling the vehicle onto its side. Sheriff John Budasik from the Martin County Sheriff's Office told reporters that Woods showed signs of impairment after the incident.
At the Martin County Jail, and even on scene, we really weren't suspicious of alcohol being involved in this case, and that proved to be true at the jail. So Mr. Woods did a breathalyzer test, blew 000s, but when it came time for us to ask for a urinalysis test, he refused, and so he's been charged with DUI, with property damage, and refusal to submit to a lawful test.
Well, President Trump was asked for his reaction as news of the crash emerged.
I feel so badly. He's got some difficulty. There was an accident, and that's all I know. Very close friend of mine. He's an amazing person, amazing man, but some difficulty.
Didn't want to talk about it any further, but definitely Tiger Woods has had previous car accidents that we can mention in 2021, in 2017, 2009, 2025.
Doesn't matter if he's got a steering wheel or a golf club in his hands, he's the most dangerous driver on the planet. It just keeps on happening. I mean, there's a huge discrepancy in the skills level between the two.
How long did it take you to come up with that?
Too long. 17 seconds. Listen, I wish I knew more about golf. I know that they call it driving. The thing is, he's obviously a very deeply troubled individual, a very flawed individual. From what little we all know about his private life, a lot of it, of course, has come out in the past. And there have been some pretty, pretty disheartening, pretty embarrassing moments for him, linked to all of these crashes.
Just looking at images of the car.
I think the key thing, though, that has to be taken away is, listen, I crack a joke about this. It's, people will continue to crack jokes about this because it's a celebrity and, he's done it again. But, looking at the footage there, this is actually another very dangerous situation where this man has taken his life into his own hands, messed about, and frankly, it's amazing that he doesn't end up causing more damage to himself or to others, given that he is always behind a very powerful car, because he is a man who is able to possess those kind of cars, and he keeps losing control of them in this situation. It's a miracle that he's not killed himself.
Well, in 2021, he did suffer very severe injuries, limb-threatening injuries to his leg, and that was after a high-speed single-car rollover, similar to this, where the car actually rolled over on its side. Susie?
Yeah, I mean, it's like being back in 2009 again. I think when the first time that he was said to have been cheating on his wife and she smashed his car up with the golf clubs. You kind of wonder what year we're in sometimes. But the fact is, he's not just taking his own life in his hands. When anybody gets in a vehicle which is several tons of metal and then drives it at any kind of speed, and he was apparently speeding, you're taking other people's lives in your hands. There could have been, this is broad daylight in the afternoon. There could have been kids walking down their street. There could have been a little old lady, anybody who could have been wiped out and totaled. And the fact that he hasn't learned his lesson after all this time, and after all these repeated crashes, and after all the repeated rehab, just makes you think, well, there comes a point, I think, where people have just too much money and they just think they don't need to learn from what they've done, and they can just actually carry on doing it. And there's enough people around them who'll keep on giving them the Congressional Medal of Honor and praising them and being friends with presidents, and they just don't ever have the real consequences for their actions. He plainly doesn't care too much about the consequences of his last crash on his own body and his own family, and has been out there and done it again. He's obviously a troubled individual, but I think those people who are watching this at home need to remember, if you get in a car and you're impaired, then there's a lot of other lives that can be at stake.
Do you think we should be affording him some more sympathy? I mean, he clearly does need help.
You can allow sympathy up to a certain point, yes, because, as Susie says, this is a man with demons that obviously he hasn't been able to overcome, and, every time that something goes bad in his life, it has knock-on effects, and that causes other bad things to happen as well. On the other hand, tremendously wealthy individual, it's not like he won't have access to any kind of support and any kind of help, and it's simply the question of, listen, if it happens once, if it happens twice, you kind of sat there going, oh, that's sad. When you're on the third, fourth time, you are kind of sat there and going, OK, it's just a pattern now, actually. And, if you were doing other silly things, maybe, I don't know, he was fallen off a pier because he got too drunk or something like that, or was under the influence of drugs, you go, OK, at least he's not doing the same thing over and over again. But intelligent life is meant to learn from its mistakes. At some point, I think we have to say, listen, I can't imagine that in this country he'd still have a licence to drive. Actually, what are the authorities doing, letting this man keep on doing the same thing over and over again? Somebody actually has to step in and say, look, you're not capable of operating vehicles like this.
Yeah, interesting point. I don't know if they have a points-based system in the state.
It's not like he can't afford to pay for a driver.
That's true.
If you keep doing this,
that's true.
If you keep doing this and you want to stop drinking, or you keep wanting to take too many Sudafed or whatever it is, then fine. But, you pay the driver. He's got access to all the help in the world. And if it's not able to do it, pay a driver, for goodness sake. It's not like he can suffer too much. It's not like he's got to do the school run, is it?
OK. Should we leave it there? Let's take a break at that point. Coming up next, we'll have a look at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us if you can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
You are watching The Wrap. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, The Guardian leads with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the war with Iran will be over in weeks, not months. But Israel warned they're preparing to escalate and expand their attacks. The FT reports on the news global stocks and bonds have suffered their biggest combined sell-off since 2022 as the energy fallout leaves investors with nowhere to hide. The Mirror reports that the Prime Minister has said he will not buckle under pressure to join Donald Trump's war in Iran, saying the war is not in Britain's best interest, despite the US President taunting him. As petrol prices hit a £1.50 a litre, Keir Starmer is being urged to follow other countries and cut tax on drivers. That's on the front of The Sun. According to a poll conducted by The Eye, half of voters are already tightening their belts in response to the Iran war. That's on their front page. Nigel Farage has called for the Afghan migrant found guilty of raping a 12-year-old girl to be deported immediately. That's on the front of The Express. The Star leads on the news that golf legend Tiger Woods has been involved in a car crash in Florida, 5 years after sustaining serious injuries in another crash. The Telegraph reveals Scotland Yard has reopened the investigation into the alleged phone theft of the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, saying there are questions over the sequence of events. Well, let's start with the Telegraph front page, Susie and Benedict, and this story here regarding Kemi Badenoch considering a ban on the burqa. She's considering a ban in an attempt to tackle Islamist extremism, as revealed by the Telegraph.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this comes in the wake of Nick Timothy, his opining on prayer in public spaces like Trafalgar Square and singling out Islam over other religions as being, I think he's described it as dominating or intimidating or something like that. This is, I think actually this is interesting on two fronts because it's a step away from the idea of personal liberty. Of course, for a long time, the Conservative Party has liked to sort of portray itself as slightly more libertarian-leaning, and it's a big believer in the idea of individual freedoms, and that includes things like freedom to worship how you choose. And that's why it was always very staunchly opposed to the idea of any sort of ban on face coverings. But this, I think, is interesting because it's the sort of thing that Reform does very much sort of goes hard on this idea of Islam being incompatible to a degree, well, not Islam, sorry, Islamism being incompatible with a lot of British values. They're getting a lot of hay out of that. And it's something I think that does get them a lot of support that potentially comes from the Conservatives. And I think that this is a sort of a way the Conservatives will view this as a way of trying to sort of eke some of that back, sort of portraying themselves as tough on this. But it's a curious thing because it's happening at the exact same moment that Labour is trying very hard to win back a lot of voters in Muslim-leaning areas and a lot of other voters who feel that Muslims are being unfairly targeted. At the exact moment that the Green Party have been siphoning off those votes, this could actually be quite a good opportunity for Labour to say, look, if you want to vote Green, that's fine, but as has already started, the process of people saying if you vote Green, you're more likely to let Reform or the Tories in somewhere else. It could, in fact, backfire to a degree if you wanted to weaken the current government, because it could actually say to a lot of voters, listen, if you don't like that sort of thing, you're better off voting Labour rather than Green, because otherwise you're going to let in this kind of tendency. You don't want to split the left-wing vote, because that's what's coming down the track otherwise.
The Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp quoted here as saying that the burqa can be divisive and work against integration and foster extremism.
They're not remotely bothered about extremism. This is a way of having an attack on Reform UK. It's as simple as that. They want to steal some Reform votes back by saying we will ban face coverings. And it may well work. There is... you can say, well, look, you still are able to wear the hijab. You are still able to be devout. You may still worship as you pleased, but not cover your face. And as Ben says, that puts Labour in difficult positions. If that becomes official Tory policy, is going to attract a lot of reform voters, and it's going to put Labour in the position where they either have to oppose that on religious freedom grounds in order to sort up the Muslim vote, which is a minority compared to the white vote, or they have to say, oh no, we're fine with banning the burqa, which will then cost them something as well, and also cost even just their normal left-wing support will go, I don't think that's very nice, we shouldn't be doing it. So Kemi Badenoch, by doing this, she's put Labour in a difficult position, and she's stealing some of the thunder from reform. Whether you like the idea or not, it has happened in other European countries. The European Court of Human Rights has ruled that it's a reasonable and OK thing to do. So, you know, she's making increasingly good political decisions.
What
frankly.
I would say just very quickly, though, is, of course, famously France banned the burqa. Hasn't done a lot to dampen down Islamism in that country. If anything, you might say it's contributed to an atmosphere where it's ratcheted up slightly. So it's one of those where, on the face of it, you think, OK, a lot of people might agree, but it's careful what you wish for. It's quite a superficial thing in the grand scheme of actually tackling the ideology.
Should we move on to the Telegraph? Also, actually, same front page. I thought we were moving on to the inside, and that's looking at Morgan McSweeney and this probe into the sequence of events in terms of his phone being stolen, when, how, where.
Yeah, none of it quite adds up, so the police have opened a new probe into it. And this, of course, then has the potential to be yet another very embarrassing incident for the government if you've got pretty much the most senior sort of aide to the Prime Minister not being particularly forthcoming with the police about being the victim of a crime, which could have potentially very serious security ramifications. The fact that, as far as we know, it hasn't so far is beside the point. This happened, not enough information was given, and it's only sort of become public knowledge after the fact when trying to explain away another scandal that was completely unrelated. But on top of that, there are also, once again, very embarrassing aspects for the police about this, because phone theft, certainly in central London, is rife. Everybody knows that it's rife. Everybody knows that the police don't actually respond to it most of the time. And I mean, one of the standout aspects of this is that, despite the fact that the Met are going to launch this probe, they're worried that there might not be enough evidence anyway, because CCTV gets wiped after 3 months, and this was over a year ago. And you kind of sat there going, well, it's a real comedy of errors here. You've got the Prime Minister's aide, who ought to know better, not giving the information. You've got the Metropolitan Police, who, in the most surveilled city on earth, are saying, sorry, we don't have the footage. It's just, once again, demonstrative of a situation where the system itself, at the very highest level, isn't working how it should be. How can the average voter then sort of sit back and go, well, if it doesn't work for them, if they can't get to the bottom of who stole Morgan McSweeney's phone and he's not being forthcoming about it, what hope have the rest of us got? And also, frankly, what hope have we got of getting to the bottom of the Mandelson story? Because clearly, this was a key part of the evidence.
We have run out of time, but this story, I think, will go on and on. We're just at the begiggings of it.
Yeah, because you can get your WhatsApps elsewhere than on your phone. You don't need the phone. Sorry, I don't know why we're getting a big tiz about it.
We're going to take a break. Coming up, all the sport for you next night for Ben White. Action from England's friendly draw with Uruguay after late penalty drama at Wembley.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
It's Friday night, sport night. Let's get all the latest with Josh.
Did you have conversations with Rafa Benitez?
Yes, through his agent and a couple with Rafa. That's another reason he put me off. He started talking about me playing left back, which didn't sit nicely with me. I was just starting to play regularly in centre midfield for a few years, and he spoke about me being a bit more versatile. He didn't sell it too well.
After 4 bids, the latest thought to be £15 million, Liverpool insist they're still talking to Villa and have not made a final offer.
Liverpool put a bid in, which wasn't accepted by Mr. Lerner. Mr. Lerner went back to them and they didn't go through.
I don't think Villa were difficult, to be fair. They set a price and stuck to it. In the absence of other deals, we didn't have the funding to complete it.
Once again, his relationship with the Anfield board is under scrutiny. The veto of Gareth Barry's transfer from Aston Villa prompted renewed suggestions Rafa Benitez enjoys less than full backing from Liverpool's owners. In response, the club have released this statement. It is obviously the selling club's prerogative to put whatever price they want on the player, but on this occasion, Liverpool think the price quoted is too high.
There were other priorities. One of Rafa's points was that Gareth was versatile, that he could play left back. The owners, which by that stage were Tom Hicks and George Gillette, pointed out we'd just spent quite a lot of money on De Sena, a left back. Unless we could raise some money, it was going to be too expensive, and then it became contingent on being able to sell Shabby, which didn't happen.
And Liverpool fans blame me for Alonso leaving, but not once did he say Alonso was going to be leaving.
Quite why there was no interest in Shabby is a bit of a mystery, because clearly he was a phenomenal player and a phenomenal talent. And we bought Robbie Keane the same time, of course. Seems like small numbers now, but we were looking at spending a net 20 million each season, so the funding just wasn't there.
Gareth became terribly disappointed with Liverpool. I think, to Gareth's astonishment, a couple of weeks later they paid £20 million for Robbie Keane.
I think that was a signal to Barry that, did you really want me that much?
When I knew the transfer was going to happen, I got my head down. There wasn't too many boos.
Who would have thought Gareth Barry's Villa career would come to this? Booed at every touch by the fans that once loved him.
It's got to face the music, really. You should leave, to be honest.
There were chants of Judas, booed every time he touched the ball.
It's been a long, long saga, really long. It's been talking about maybe 16, 17 weeks now. And of course, I think that some stage or another, it must affect you.
Mentally, it was a real tough period, and I regret doing some things.
I think he probably felt that he let himself down. I think he thought, I'm normally a more measured character than that, and I've dropped my guard, and look at the mess that it's got me into.
We let bygones be bygones. He came back. If he'd gone to Liverpool in the manner in which he did, he wouldn't have gone with my blessing. No, no. I would never have spoken to him again.
We all knew.
Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, the weekend will be chilly and unsettled, but conditions look milder and less changeable next week as pressure builds in the southwest. It's a cold start to the day with a frost in rural areas. Blustery showers in the north and west may be heavy at times and turn wintry over the higher ground. A more organised band of showers will spread south across Scotland, potentially leaving a covering of snow on the peaks there. England and Wales will start the day mostly dry and bright. However, showers will become more widespread and the shower band in the north will spread into the Midlands as a weakening feature.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Much more to come, including President Trump claiming he's won concessions from Iran. Do stay with us for more.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Tonight on The Wrap, Donald Trump claims concessions from Iran. He says Tehran agreed to send 10 ships of oil to make up for denying his claims that ceasefire negotiations were really underway.
Remember this, they lied about 3 days ago. I said, yeah, we're negotiating with Israel. We are not negotiating. They're being hit so hard, anybody would be negotiating.
Prime Minister tells Sky News he won't bow to pressure from Donald Trump to change his mind about the war in the Middle East.
I want to be equally clear. I'm not going to waver on this. I'm not going to back down.
The world's most famous golfer is charged with driving under the influence after a car crash in Florida. Police say he showed clear signs of impairment.
So Mr. Woods did a breathalyzer test, blew triple zeros, but when it came time for us to ask for a urinalysis test, he refused, and so he's been charged with DUI.
We discuss the day's biggest stories with Susie Boniface and Benedict Spence. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including coverage of our interview with the Prime Minister. Good evening, happy Friday. Susie and Benedict, welcome to you both. Well, Donald Trump has claimed that he's won concessions from Iran. Speaking in Miami tonight, he said Iran sent him 10 ships of oil to make up for suggesting earlier in the week that peace talks were not actually underway. Take a look at this.
Remember this? They lied about 3 days ago. I said, yeah, we're negotiating with Israel. We are not negotiating. They're being hit so hard, anybody would be negotiating. They are negotiating. They're begging to make a deal. They're begging to make a deal. Turned out I was right. They were negotiating, which they admitted 2 days later. And in order to make up for their misstatement, they said, we're going to send you 8 ships of oil. And the following day I saw, this is 2 days ago, I saw on one of the networks, very strange. There are 8 ships of oil coming out of Iran. And then they actually said, we're going to add an extra 2. And they added an extra 2, so we had 10 ships. And then people realized we were actually negotiating. We're negotiating now, and it'd be great if we could do something, but they have to open it up.
Meanwhile, Iran has condemned the latest strikes on its territory. It's reported that Israel has targeted 2 nuclear sites inside Iran. Last night, President Trump said he would hold off on striking Iran's energy plants for a further 10 days per Iranian government request to allow space for negotiations. Tonight, Iran's foreign minister said that the latest attacks are in breach of that offer. Well, Abbas Araghchi posted this on social media. Israel has hit 2 of Iran's largest steel factories, a power plant and civilian nuclear sites, amongst other infrastructure. Israel claims it acted in coordination with the US. The attack contradicts POTUS's extended deadline for diplomacy. Iran will exact heavy price for Israeli crimes. Now, US correspondent Martha Kellner is in Miami for us tonight.
Meandering yet bullish speech as ever. He spoke about the American military being the greatest in the world, having weapons that no one's ever seen before. He said that they are decimating Iran, that this military operation is 2 weeks ahead of schedule. He said Iran is not the bully in that region any longer. He described them as being on the run. But I'm not sure we really learned a great deal more about the off-ramp that Donald Trump is clearly looking for in this conflict. He did, though, take the opportunity at this conference. This conference is called the FII. It's hosted by a Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund. He took the opportunity in front of this audience to thank his allies in the Middle East. He named the United Arab Emirates. He named the Saudis, calling them powerful. He then waxed lyrical about Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince. He said, you have more titles than everyone else on earth, and you deserve that because you're a winner. And he said that the future of that region has never looked brighter. This conference, though, taking place against the backdrop of MBS, apparently telling Donald Trump that he wants him to continue in this war until it is absolutely finished. The Saudi crown prince perhaps sniffing an opportunity to reshape the region and put the Saudis at the very forefront of it in the future. He also, rather bizarrely, played a clip. Donald Trump played a clip from CNN, which showed a poll indicating that the MAGA base of the Republican Party supports him 100% on this conflict. I do think, though, that there are certain areas that they wouldn't support him. I've been speaking to hardcore members of the MAGA base, and they say that if there are boots on the ground, US boots on the ground in Iran, they would no longer support this war. Certainly, though, Donald Trump's Foreign Secretary Marco Rubio says there are no plans for US troops on the ground in Iran. There was, as ever, a couple of moments of comic relief, if you like, in that speech from the president. He accidentally called the Strait of Hormuz the Strait of Trump to laughs from the audience. He then said, there's no mistakes from me, although the fake news would have it otherwise.
Methinks it wasn't an accident calling it the Strait of Trump.
I would be. He's not the sort of man who makes major blunders like that, is he? That's a very unusual thing to
No, he never trips
fire
over
off
his words, does
No,
he?
not at all.
He's always really lucid.
It's this Ozymandias tendency of his is just, completely part of the shtick. I mean, listen. If it is going to be renamed the Strait of Trump, it's not going to be for good reasons, put it that way. Let's say at the end of all of this, everybody does start referring to it as that. It might be because it's more in terms of Trump's folly rather than anything else. At this moment in time, nobody is any the wiser as to what, in fact, the end results, the end goals are, whether or not he even knows what they are and how close they are to getting there. For all we know, they might actually have objectives that they've not told us, and they're actually getting quite close to them. They seem fairly confident that they're going to be able to end the war in a couple of weeks.
Well, Marco Rubio is saying that it will end.
Absolutely. Who are we to disagree with little Marco? But we wait and see. It must be said, this is the very frustrating aspect of all of this particular conflict, and perhaps not unusual, but far more so than any other conflict I can remember. You have so many different sides, briefing and counter-briefing, not just against the other side, but against each other and contradicting each other. And yes, you've got Caroline Leavitt doing her impression of the North Korean news announcer going, yes, absolutely, everything's fine, clap, 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 everything the president says is going completely well. But you can't hide from the fact that even though the Iranians are being heavily degraded militarily, the United States is running out of missiles and equipment. They're still able to fire stuff through at the Gulf allies. They're all getting incredibly jumpy. And fact remains, if we extricate, well, I say we, if the coalition of forces involved extricate themselves from this fight, and there is no major regime change in Iran, and all they've done is just stymied their nuclear ambitions for a little bit, but they're still able to disrupt global oil and gas supplies at any given time, what have we actually got out of this? We've bought ourselves maybe another couple of months until Iran ratchets its program up again, and then we do the dance all over again just indefinitely until one side just gives up? Nobody can see the off-ramp here, I think, is the thing. As much as Trump would love there to be one, there isn't one that's appearing to anybody, and for as long as the Israelis are able to just operate with impunity and do what they want to do, which is what has happened, every time that happens, Trump just gets sucked straight back into it again.
I mean, all the reporting is that Donald Trump is looking for an off-ramp. Do you believe that is the case when we're seeing 10,000 US troops being sent to the region? We're seeing Israel striking nuclear sites in Iran.
Trump is an analogue figure in a digital world. If you want to go and have a straight fight war with someone, America would win. But if you're fighting someone who is theoretically, your sort of weaker opponent, but far more capable of fighting in asymmetric ways and doing mad, weird stuff like just firing a bomb at that guy over there just to upset everybody, and then that guy gets upset, and then that's affected something else, then you're not fighting the kind of war that Trump wanted to have when he thought he'd have a very quick hit and he'd look really good. And what's happened is we'll end up having World War Trump. Not World War III, it'll be World War Trump. That's the only thing that will be named after him in the long run. Because if you end up with, as we were saying earlier on, Middle Eastern states who think they can no longer rely on the US for protection, who now need to have their own nuclear weapons and deterrence in order to protect themselves from an emboldened Iran, who, as Ben said, will have nuclear weapons anyway in a few weeks, months, years before they get to that point, then you will have proliferation of nuclear weapons in a very volatile part of the world, and something will go wrong. At the very least, there'll be an awful lot of testing, probably in the atmosphere, and when that happens, you may as well just have the nuclear war, frankly, because you're irradiating a lot of people.
But Donald Trump wants to keep those Gulf states on side, doesn't he? He made very complimentary reference to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
We're still having it.
I mean, he wants to keep them on side. The Gulf states would say, look, there are many ways to skin a raccoon. They don't just have to stay with the United States. They can go to China, they can go to Russia, or, of course, as you said, they can start to produce their own munitions, and that does mean nuclear weapons. That's not a situation that anybody wants, because actually we're not just talking the Gulf states, we're also talking about the states on the periphery that are a lot less stable. So Saudi Arabia gets one if Iran gets one. Turkey will then get one if Saudi Arabia gets one. With me so far? That's still not great, because possibly Azerbaijan gets one, and everybody's going, hang on, Azerbaijan wants one? Well, makes a lot of sense. But then maybe Egypt gets one. Egypt has already had a revolution within, a decade or so ago, and is not in a particularly good political state right now. And then you've got that proliferation, that series of things, and it might not, this is the other thing, it might not just be nuclear weapons as well. What Iran is, particularly adept at, or has a lot of, is proxy groups and, supplying them around the region, as well as hundreds of thousands of ground troops. Nuclear weapons might not be the greatest thing for that, but you know what is good for that? Nerve gas, that sort of thing. The things that Saddam and Colonel Gaddafi developed back in the day.
It can be delivered on drones.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's not just about nuclear weapons, it's about all of those other nasty things that, frankly, a lot of those states will simply be looking at the realpolitik and going, OK, international human rights sounds great. Actually, what we want is to stay in power. What we want is to keep our own security. There will be fewer qualms about going after those sorts of things in that part of the world. And that's before we even get onto the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the Far East, because those countries will be looking at the US, Japan, Korea and Taiwan. They'll be looking at it and they'll be going, well, let's get ahead of this. Let's not wait until the war starts here. Let's actually develop these things for ourselves before we're in that situation and we're having to rely on Donald Trump.
And for all the reasons you state, those are the reasons why Israel want to continue this war.
Yeah, but then with all that, you have more economic impact. You have more people wanting to move away from a place they don't want to be in anymore. You have more religious fundamentalism, and you have more of a refugee crisis, which will make other countries that getting sucked into something that they claim they don't want to get sucked into. The whole thing is a mess from top to bottom, and it was started by a dangerous moron who's going to be out of power in 2 years anyway if the donuts don't get him first.
What I would say,
I'm
just very quickly...
worried about the libel courts, Susie.
She didn't... Oh, I was about to say she didn't say which one, and then she did. But I was going to say it's not just at his behest, though, because a lot of this is about Israel, ultimately. And the weird thing is, I'm sort of sat here thinking, listen, we don't know what Donald Trump's goals are in this, because they seem to change from day to day.
He doesn't know
but
what
I
his goals
think
are.
Israel knows what it wants to get out of this. It's not telling anybody, but ultimately that's because Israel is not, as open to the same amount of Western scrutiny, because actually, you see those press conferences in the US, the White House press corps is not going to be going to Israel and asking Benjamin Netanyahu the same questions. Those would be better questions, would be better addressed, to Benjamin Netanyahu. Not that, of course, he'll ever allow that or would ever get that, but I suspect that actually is where the fulcrum of this war lies. You want to know who has the plan? It's that guy, not the guy in the White House who claims 100% of MAGA Republicans back what he's doing.
But the most important is who has the power as well.
Well, this is the thing. He does have a lot of the power, but has been demonstrated over and over again, he can't reel in the Israelis. If the Israelis decide to do something, the United States might be the most powerful military on earth. It still can't actually get a handle on that ally.
Interesting. Should we talk about the relationship between Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump? The Prime Minister has told Sky News that mounting criticism from Donald Trump will not make him change his mind on staying out of the Iran war. Sir Keir Starmer was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, for the Electoral Dysfunction podcast.
So I'm going to ask you about President Trump, because you've invested a lot in that relationship. But in recent weeks, he's insulted you, he's demeaned you, he's poked fun at you. You are the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And for many people in the UK, many people listening to this podcast or watching it, insulting you is like insulting our country. Do you understand why some people feel like that?
There's undoubtedly been, some hard decisions over the last few weeks. I have been clear I'm not going to join the war. There's a clear difference, therefore, of opinion between me and President Trump. My own view is that a lot of what is said and done has been to put pressure on me to change my mind. But I'm not going to do so, because I'm the British Prime Minister and I have to act in the British national interest, and I will always act in the British national interest.
Do you think he underestimated you because you'd worked really hard at the relationship? I had followed you around. I remember being in the White House and you came out and you were pleased because he'd backed NATO and Article 5. He'd signalled he was going to do a good deal for trade. You were really personally proud that you felt like you had found this connection. You tried to accommodate him. Do you think he took that as weakness from you?
Well, I wanted a good relationship. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I still want a good relationship. You know, as we work our way through this, I'm sure that is possible. But I want to be equally clear. I'm not going to waver on this. I'm not going to back down.
You're only human. I mean, it must make you bristle. It would make me bristle if someone spoke about me like that.
I think I understand what's happening. It's to put pressure on me.
Yeah.
In different ways. But that pressure isn't going to make me waver. It's not going to make me abandon my principles or values. And that's just the way I am. That isn't new. That isn't because of President Trump. I've got core values and principles I've held all my life, and they're irreducible.
And also, you stand up to bullies. You don't like being bullied, right? And you don't like seeing people bullied.
Well, look, I stand up for my principles and my values.
Do you think his poll ratings will go up following that interview? Because he showed a more human side, and also that he will not be bullied, standing up for himself.
Weirdly, not because I think he's handled it particularly well. I think almost accidentally his stance is very popular with most people in this country who do not want to be dragged into this kind of situation and have, you know, looked at Keir Starmer as being a bit fundamentally sort of, you know, not as authoritative as they were hoping, perhaps not as effective as they were hoping, but sort of in the face of the last couple of weeks have been sat there going, OK, things could have been worse. The issue is, I think, the energy crisis and the cascade of price rises that will come as a result of that down the line, that's going to hit everybody, regardless of anything that Keir Starmer does. And whilst he can then, you know, give interviews and come across a little bit more human, and a lot of people will go, well, that's a nice change, actually. This is a side of him we haven't seen before. Any goodwill that is gained by that is going to be wiped out by the economic effects that people feel in their pockets. And whether or not that's Keir Starmer's fault, which in this case it clearly isn't his fault, he is still going to be the one who gets in the neck because he's the Prime Minister. And, you know, I think you're right. We could see a very small bump at the polls. Then I think that there's going to be a bit of a tidal wave because, listen, I don't share Marco Rubio's optimism. I don't think it's going to be over in a couple of weeks. And I think that the energy price shocks are already built in. They're coming and they're going to keep on happening. And Britain is pretty uniquely vulnerable to a lot of them, it must be said.
But this is a good look for Starmer, isn't it? Standing up to Trump in spite of the criticism, in spite of the humiliation, the name-calling and the criticism from Donald Trump. He says he's not going to change his stance.
Absolutely. It's completely worked from the polls. It's more than a small bump, especially because the poll ratings were so low. It's quite a significant bump. And I think, you know, by pegging his colours to the mast, as it were, that we are against Donald Trump, is exactly where everyone else in the world is right now. I mean, all right, he's on the same side as the Ayatollah, but it doesn't really matter. I think most people in this country would just prefer that we are, you know, tacking away from the mad Oompa Loompa. And, you know, although, you know, Keir Starmer's had his detractors, the whole centrist dad, Mr Boring thing, well, actually, at the moment, Mr Boring would be quite nice. So, you know, I think most people are fine with it, and he's going to, if carries on doing it. I think also we're coming up to a budget in March, or a spring statement, rather, and that, you know, there's an opportunity there for Rachel Reeves to do something about energy prices or taxes at the pumps, that kind of thing, which would be popular and would come in. Sorry, we've already had the spring statement, haven't we?
Yes.
I am quite tired. It's too late, but she could do something like that at some point, and that would be something which is going to obviously meet some approval. She doesn't have to do much. She's only got to do a little tweak here and there, and it could have quite a big impact.
I mean, emergency mini budgets and price guarantees for energy have never gone badly in the past. Oh wait, no, that's perhaps not the route you want to go down.
Rewind.
There'll be an ideological battle though with Ed Miliband is the key thing, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves to talk about, you know, returning more to fossil fuel extraction in the short to medium term. Not that it would necessarily have a huge impact on people's bills, but it might improve the confidence of the markets in Britain's economy to weather the storm long term. The problem is, of course, it's not just the cabinet. A lot of the backbenchers, of course, are very opposed to that sort of thing. So we're back in, you know, familiar territory for Keir Starmer. He can see something that he could do. The issue is his party, and a lot of them don't want him to do that sort of thing.
But we could see the Chancellor do something about the taxes, the pumps, the prices that people are having to pay because of this war, because I think one of the papers, I think it's The Sun, saying, you know, that they're coining it now.
Yeah, it's one of the small levers that she is able to pull, so she could do that in time that she wants. And the other thing you could do, of course, and which would be, I think, very necessary, be one of those things where you start talking about, you know, what you can do for your country in terms of we're all facing a crisis, there's not much money, how do we all get through this? You can support methods by which people in the country and homeowners use less energy, or perhaps do more home energy production. If you start properly subsidising solar panels, properly subsidising home generation of heat and so on and power, then there is no reason that you can't, you know, become more stable, create more jobs, have a growing economy, and move away from the reliance on fossil fuels all at the same time. And it's not impossible. The tech for solar panels is so much better than it was. They're so much cheaper. If the government just subsidised them and made it a law that they've got to go on every roof in the country, on every farm barn roof and every other roof, then, I mean, who cares anymore?
Possible solutions there, but those are all
what I would do if I was Ed Miliband.
Long-term, all long-term.
Well, you can do it in a year.
We shall see. Coming up, Tiger Woods has been arrested and charged with driving under the influence after a car crash in Florida.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
You are watching The Wrap. Our next story tonight. Police say that the golfer Tiger Woods has been arrested and charged with driving under the influence after a car crash in Florida. Police say Woods had tried to overtake a truck at high speed while driving this Land Rover before swerving and rolling the vehicle onto its side. Sheriff John Budensiek from the Martin County Sheriff's Office told reporters that Woods showed signs of impairment after the accident.
At the Martin County Jail, and even on scene, we really weren't suspicious of alcohol being involved in this case, and that proved to be true at the jail. So Mr. Woods did a breathalyzer test, blew 000s, but when it came time for us to ask for a urinalysis test, he refused, and so he's been charged with DUI, with property damage, and refusal to submit to a lawful test.
Well, President Trump was asked for his reaction as news of the crash emerged.
I feel so badly. He's got some difficulty. There was an accident, and that's all I know. Very close friend of mine. He's an amazing person, amazing man, but some difficulty.
Yeah, he looked quite saddened, genuinely, there, actually, President Trump, because, as he was saying, very good friend of his.
Yeah, I mean, Tiger Woods clearly have a whale of an evening. It's, honestly, it gets to a point where you've got somebody who keeps on getting into these sort of situations, and you have to ask, why is it that it's being allowed to happen? Why are there no people around him stepping in to say, listen, Tiger, like, even if you want to go for a drive or something like that, have you had a drink? Have you been doing something else this evening? Think about, what could happen. You've done this XYZ number of times. Intelligent life is supposed to learn from its mistakes. He's doing this over and over again. He is obviously a very tormented individual. I think this is quite well documented. He's not had the happiest of lives, but that's not an excuse when you're on your, sort of beyond your second or maybe even third instance of this. He is somebody who's got all the resources in the world to get whatever issues he has under control. Why hasn't it happened yet? It's farcical at this point for it to be happening.
And as you say, the warning signs have been there. Accident in 2021 in California, which he suffered severe injuries. In May 2017 in Florida, police found him asleep behind the wheel. In November 2009, also in Florida, there was an incident outside his home where he struck a fire hydrant. And then this in 2026. Yeah. But as Benedict was saying, where are the people that care for him around him?
Well, he's upset a lot of them over the years, including wives and girlfriends, and so they're not around anymore. But the fact is that if he was a poorer man and a less famous man, he wouldn't probably still have his driving licence. And he probably wouldn't be able to afford his medical rehab after the last accident. It's because he's rich and because people have let him get away with stuff and because he's mates with the president and all the rest of it, that he's been able to be in a position where he still thinks there's nothing wrong with getting behind the wheel of 2 tons of metal when he's under the influence and driving it in a way which is guaranteed to probably kill someone. It's just been incredibly lucky that he hasn't killed anybody else yet with all these accidents and incidents, because that's what's going to happen. And the next time it happens, if there is a next time, it will happen, because you can't keep dodging that particular bullet. I imagine all his neighbours in Florida are not setting foot outside the house without some kind of armour plating on them, because if Tiger's driving around, you're probably quite worried. But, he's got his issues, but he clearly needs more help than he's getting. He clearly needs someone to say, I don't care how rich you are, you don't drive anymore, this is your driving licence gone. And he's easily got the money to afford a driver. He doesn't even need to do it. He could easily go and hire the Nürburgring and drive around in a big circle when he's drunk if he wants to, and keep it away from other people. He's not interested in protecting other people. So I have no sympathy for him. I'm surprised a bit about Donald Trump, because although they're on good terms, Donald Trump's brother was an alcoholic, and he is famously sober himself and doesn't approve of heavy drinking. So, I'd have thought his attitude towards Tiger Woods might be less than sympathetic.
Do you think we're at the point now where his licence will be taken on board?
I don't know what the rules are in Florida around this sort of thing. I'm amazed that he does still have a driver's license. I can't imagine that either here or anywhere else in Europe that this would still be allowed to be happening. It shouldn't be getting to the point, though, where it's sort of splayed out for the world's media to be asking the question, should this man still have a driver's license? At some level, local authorities ought to be saying, this man is a menace on the roads if he's had a drink, for whatever reason. Actually, in the interest of the safety of our citizens, something needs to be done. We shouldn't be waiting for other people externally to be going, hang on, why is this allowed?
OK, should we take a look at the newspapers now? What's making the front pages? Well, The Guardian leads with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the war with Iran will be over in weeks, not months. But Israel warned they're preparing to escalate and expand their attack. The FT reports on the news global stocks and bonds have suffered their biggest combined sell-off since 2022 as the energy fallout leaves investors with nowhere to hide. As petrol prices hit £1.50 a litre, the boss of Asda has hit out at ministers, claiming they have zero credibility as relations between industry and the government deteriorate. That story's on the front of the Daily Mail. According to a poll conducted by the Eye, half of voters are already tightening their belts in response to the Iran war. That's on their front page. Nigel Farage has called for the Afghan migrant found guilty of raping a 12-year-old girl to be deported immediately. That's on the front of the Express. The Star leads on that news that golf legend Tiger Woods has been involved in a car crash in Florida 5 years after sustaining serious injuries in another crash. The Sun reports that the golf star was arrested and charged after officers said he showed signs of impairment. The Telegraph reveals Scotland Yard has reopened the investigation into the alleged phone theft of the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, saying there are questions over the sequence of events. So let's start with the Mail front page and that line that ministers have zero credibility on petrol crisis. That's the boss of Asda speaking. Benedict, sorry.
It's a tricky situation, I suppose, because ultimately this is not a crisis of this government's making, but it is one that it's going to have to handle either way. As we've touched upon earlier, things like oil and gas and also petrol is something that's heavily taxed in the UK, and this is something that the government could have. It does have the power to alleviate some of the pressure on. It is noticeable, though, of course, that a lot of politicians have done the opposite thing, which is immediately say, what we're going to do is we're going to stop price gouging. We're going to stop companies putting up their petrol prices. Ultimately, a lot of companies that sell petrol don't really have a lot of leeway. They've got a product that they have to sell, and if that product suddenly becomes very expensive because Donald Trump launches a war in the Middle East, well, they have to adjust their prices accordingly, otherwise they don't turn a profit. This is something, I think, that has to be handled very delicately. It's not the government's fault that this has happened, and it's not the supermarket chains or anybody else's fault that they have to act accordingly to put their prices up. They have to find a way, though, of alleviating the strain on the consumer, because it does affect millions of people every day. And at a time when, we already have runaway inflation over the last couple of years, that could come back. There are going to be other price rises down the line. There have to be ways of making sure that ordinary people who are going to be squeezed the most by this are not squeezed unnecessarily. If that means the government cutting a couple of taxes here or there and maybe then doing a deal with some providers to say you're going to have to cut your profits down a little bit in the short term, that's, I think, what's going to have to happen.
And, Susie, it is within the government's gift to alleviate the pressure on the consumer, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think perhaps part of the moves early on for the government and Rachel Reeves to accuse the petrol companies of price gouging was kind of way of getting a bit ahead of the need to cut those taxes, because she needs that revenue to come in. And if you're going to start talking about the petrol companies price gouging, then the voters and the drivers, when they're going down the road, are going, good Lord, look at that, we've seen the price, 172p for diesel, and they're blaming the companies for it, or they've heard something about the companies being blamed for it. And so there isn't so much pressure politically or publicly on the Chancellor to cut the tax that she really wants, because what she wants to do in a few months' time maybe is to tweak a tax here just a tiny bit, but by no means as much as she's made already. So it was a good bit of, I suppose, political messaging or positioning to try and... But the cost of that is that she's upset all the petrol companies and the people who have the forecourts who are saying, hang on, it's not us. Why are you having a go at us? You're the one who's still making loads of money out of it. It's up to you to cut it. We can't cut it. It is what it is.
Yeah, they were warning the government about the language that was being used because they were seeing on their forecourts staff being attacked because of these rises, which are by no means their fault. Let's have a look at the Daily Express front page. And this is Nigel Farage commenting on the Afghan migrant who's been found guilty of rape. He's saying that he should be deported immediately.
Well, these stories are going to be just bread and butter to reform because they do keep coming, ultimately. You know, there's no getting away from the fact that there has been a significant number of sex attacks in this country committed by a certain subset of asylum seekers. Those stories are unavoidable, and every time one of them comes to the forefront, reform are going to absolutely make hay. The issue about when it comes to people from Afghanistan, of course, is as much as we might want to say, well, you need to deport them straight away, where do you send them to? We don't actually have a particularly working relationship with the Taliban. I don't know if anybody's noticed. So whilst there are some countries that you look at and go, it is a bit silly that you can't deport people back to those ones, Pakistan, for instance, being one, when it comes to Afghanistan, if there was one that you'd be going, OK, diplomatically a little bit difficult, it is probably that one. So, you know, it's going to be one of those where, I'm afraid to say, there's not an awful lot you can do unless your solution is to drop them off somewhere else. And we've already ditched the idea of, taking people to Rwanda, and we're not going to be taking them, airlifting them to Afghanistan ourselves. That's a tricky one that even Nigel Farage is going to struggle to solve if he becomes Prime Minister.
Well, if this is the kind of thing he does and he's Prime Minister, what he is suggesting by saying that a person who is from another country who has been convicted of a crime in this country, deporting him before he spends any time in prison because we'd have to spend money on him in prison, what he's saying is free the rapist. Bear that in mind, everybody, and everyone who's thinking of voting reform. What Nigel Farage is saying on the front page of the Express today is not kick out a bad man so he won't rape any more of our people. He's saying send him to Afghanistan where rape is absolutely fine and he will walk free. He's saying don't jail a British girl's rapist. And that girl who's gone through all those problems and had problems to start with, has gone through more problems, has managed to go through a long and horrible process to get her attacker in jail and convicted of something, would watch him get on a plane, probably get paid to leave the country and walk free. That's what Nigel Farage called for. And if only there was a single decent bloody female at the front of the Reform Party, someone might have pointed that out to him. Sorry, I'm kind of cross about that.
I'll apologise for your language there.
Quite reasonable language.
I think we can take a break, can we, at this time? I think we should take a break at this time. Coming up next, we'll have much more of the day's newspapers for you. Do stay with us.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
You are watching The Wrap. Susie and Benedict still with me. Let's take a look at the Eye front page. And they're majoring on how people are reacting to the war with Iran. And already they're tightening their belts in response, even before they're required to.
Yeah, I think people, broadly speaking, aren't stupid. They remember what happened when the Ukraine war happened and the energy shock that happened then and the subsequent shortages as a result of that. And I think a number of people, not everybody, but a number of people are probably proceeding quite cautiously. Although I would say, I think generally the state of the economy is such that I wouldn't be surprised if people were just doing that anyway and that this would have happened regardless because, you know, almost like ancient history now. We remember going back to the last budget and everybody going, oh, here come the tax rises, it's going to be bad, it's going to be very bad, and I think that sort of thing does filter through. So the Eye is talking about how half of people, or more than half of people, are affecting their spending on all sorts of things, including on things like energy, including, you know, things like fuel and food. But, you know, I suppose the question is, are they doing that preemptively because of what's coming down the track? Were they doing that anyway because the economy isn't in a great situation and wages are being suppressed and inflation is up? And would it even be enough, given that we don't know actually how long this war is going to go on for? We don't know exactly what the shocks are going to be. Could it be that people decide to tighten their belt and they still get a slap across the face economically anyway? You know, we're yet to see that.
One of the interesting lines here is half say the UK should drill more North Sea oil and gas. I wonder what the figure was before the war.
Yeah, well, and also, how long do you think it would take to go and reopen all that stuff and get that going, which would be some years? It's more interesting to me that over a third, 37%, haven't changed their behaviour at all. Who are these people? What are they doing with their days? Have they not noticed what's going on?
Maybe they were penny pinchers to begin with. Maybe they were the frugal.
Declining newspaper sales. If only they actually paid some attention to the world, they might be a little bit more prepared for
Perhaps
things.
this is the 37% of people who don't read newspapers. They don't know what's going on.
Aren't they, fools?
But have you changed your behaviour?
Yes.
You have?
Well, not because of this, but I've changed my behaviour recently anyway. I mean, I store big barrels of flour and oats and sugar and salsa in my garage, actually. And I've stocked up my sugar recently because I thought, right, well, that's going to be getting more expensive. So, you know.
What do they call them, the people in America?
Preppers.
Yes, yes, you're a prepper.
I am a bit.
Wow.
Yeah. But they don't catch me out. And if anybody wants sugar in the years to come, I've got the market.
So you are price gouging. You're hoarding and you're going to be selling it to people at a profit. I see.
I'm going to be eating nice food. Even
you're going to be...
too expensive.
It's not even for sale.
Very sugary food. Let's move on to the Telegraph. This story regarding Russian oligarch. Can you take us into this, Benedict?
Yeah, it turns out it's not just us that are having to sort of adjust our budgets, it's also Russia as well. Vladimir Putin is basically shaking down the people who looted the economy for decades and saying it's time to pay your way because this war actually isn't going particularly well. And even though oil may rise to hundreds of dollars a barrel, we have not actually seen the benefits of this yet, and our economy is struggling slightly. I think it's as much of a show thing.
The economy?
Yeah, he is asking them to prop up the economy.
Or telling?
Yeah. In Russia,
well,
those are the...
I was going to say... where the nearest window is.
I was going to say, is it one of those things where, you know, in China, in Mandarin, opportunity and crisis mean the same thing? Maybe in Russian, ask and tell are the same thing, I don't know. But certainly some very wealthy people are about to become slightly less very wealthy. Still very wealthy, but, you know, it's very much a kind of a, we've allowed you to ransack things for a long time, and now you're going to be buying us some guns, that kind of situation.
You wonder whether he's asking them while dangling them over a...
Exactly.
It might be giving them the option, either you pay or you go to Ukraine.
Yeah. Or there's a lovely pot of polonium tea waiting
there are so many options available to you, none of them good.
Mirror page 6, Gorton and Denton, what lessons learnt there?
Well, I can't find this, sorry. Yes, so this is the Gorton and Denton by-election, and this was Nigel Farage's accusations from the Reform Party, not just Nigel Farage, that people were going into booths, family members were going into booths, and apparently there's not actually very much evidence of this happening, and even if it was, it probably in very small, isolated cases anyway, not worth talking about any grand conspiracy. But I think really the damage has been done, actually. What was powerful about the story at the time was simply uttering the words that it might be possible and putting that little grain of doubt into people's minds. The fact that the authorities then come back and say, actually, no, there's no evidence, is not going to convince an awful lot of people who heard that story that this sort of thing might not be going on anyway. So I think it's one of those where this is going to be talked about, I think, at future elections going forward. And, even if it's not happening at all, it will be part of the discourse that in certain communities in this country, you have to be careful. And I think postal voting is another one of those, perhaps slightly more justified in that case, but where there are going to be more calls for more scrutiny on people at election time.
Well, how does it make Nigel Farage look? Because he reported it to the police and the Electoral Commission.
It makes him, he wins because people will start thinking that it's a thing, and they vaguely remember something about family voting definitely being an issue, and they won't remember the fact that actually there was absolutely no evidence of it. But this is like someone, this was reported by election observers and then reported to the police by Farage and co. And this is like someone who comes along and says, I saw your house being burgled 3 weeks ago. I did absolutely nothing about it at the time. And then, funnily enough, the police now can't find the burglar or track anyone down, and they're not even sure that you were burgled or not. It's madness, and it's only done by people who really aren't interested in catching the burglar. They're only interested in pointing out that they're fabulous about something. And it's just
the criticism is that it wasn't reported at the time of it happening. You've got
if you see someone committing a crime, tell the police.
Only about 10 seconds to talk about the humpback whale.
Oh, there's a humpback whale that's been, well, he was beached on a sandbank in northern Germany. I say northern Germany like there are coasts in other parts of Germany, but he's free now. So that's great news for him. There's a good news story to end on. And also there's a story about BMI, which is apparently wrong, which means that I'm not fat anymore. So, I just wanted to throw that in there. Great news. I'm not fat and the whale is free.
Ending on two positives.
Wonderful.
And Bendit, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. Coming up, a mixed night for Ben White. Action from England's friendly draw with Uruguay after late penalty drama at Wembley.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Time now to catch up with all of the very latest sports news for you with Josh.
Did you have conversations with Rafa Benitez?
Yes, through his agent and a couple with Rafa. That's another reason he put me off. He started talking about me playing left back, which didn't sit nicely with me. I was just starting to play regularly in centre midfield for a few years, and he spoke about me being a bit more versatile. He didn't sell it too well.
After 4 bids, the latest thought to be £15 million, Liverpool insist they're still talking to Villa and have not made a final offer.
Liverpool put a bid in, which wasn't accepted by Mr. Lerner. Mr. Lerner went back to them and they didn't go through.
I don't think Villa were difficult, to be fair. They set a price and stuck to it in the absence of other deals. We didn't have the funding to complete it.
Once again, his relationship with the Anfield board is under scrutiny. The veto of Gareth Barry's transfer from Aston Villa prompted renewed suggestions Rafa Benitez enjoys less than full backing from Liverpool's owners. In response, the club have released this statement. It is obviously the selling club's prerogative to put whatever price they want on the player, but on this occasion, Liverpool think the price quoted is too high.
There were other priorities. One of Rafa's points was that Gareth was versatile, that he could play left back. The owners, which by that stage were Tom Hicks and George Gillette, pointed out we'd just spent quite a lot of money on De Sena, a left back. Unless we could raise some money, it was going to be too expensive, and then it became contingent on being able to sell Shabby, which didn't happen.
And Liverpool fans blame me for Alonso leaving, but not once did he say Alonso was going to be leaving.
Quite why there was no interest in Shabby is a bit of a mystery, because clearly he was a phenomenal player and a phenomenal talent. And we bought Robbie Keane the same time, of course. Seems like small numbers now, but we were looking at spending a net 20 million each season, so the funding just wasn't there.
Gareth became terribly disappointed with Liverpool. I think, to Gareth's astonishment, a couple of weeks later they paid £20 million for Robbie Keane.
I think that was a signal to Barry that, did you really want me that much?
When I knew the transfer was going to happen, I got my head down. There wasn't too many boos.
Who would have thought Gareth Barry's Villa career would come to this? Booed at every touch by the fans that once loved him.
He's got to face the music, really. He should leave, to be honest.
There were chants of Judas, booed every time he touched the ball.
It's been a long, long saga, really long. It's been talking about maybe 16, 17 weeks now. And of course, I think that some stage or another, it must affect you.
Mentally, it was a real tough period, and I regret doing some things.
I think he probably felt that he let himself down. I think he thought, I'm normally a more measured character than that, and I've dropped my guard, and look at the mess that it's got me into.
We let bygones be bygones. He came back. If he'd gone to Liverpool in the manner in which he did, he wouldn't have gone with my blessing. No, no. I would never have spoken to him again.
We all knew that if Gaz came back...
Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, the weekend will be chilly and unsettled, but conditions look milder and less changeable next week as pressure builds in the southwest. It's a cold start to the day with a frost in rural areas. Blustery showers in the north and west may be heavy at times and turn wintry over the higher ground. A more organised band of showers will spread south across Scotland, potentially leaving a covering of snow on the peaks there.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?